So how do I know I'm agender? Let's talk about it. So in March of last year, I had a sort of big event happen in my life. I came out as non-binary. Now, this was something that I'd been thinking about for a while. I'd probably been thinking about this for a year or so, doing the research, doing the introspective work with myself, thinking through whether these questions that I was having about my experience of gender were authentic and real to me, and whether language like non binary was resonating with me. And finally, on the Trans Day of Visibility in 2023, I publicly came out as non-binary as my gender experience. At the time, I didn't really attach any other language to it. I felt like I was still on a process of trying to figure that out. But when I first came out, non-binary was the language I wanted to use. And I just committed to continuing exploring to see if there was other language that might make sense to me. And since March, it is now August, almost September, I have found other language that resonates with me. And I am now using agender to describe my gender identity and to talk about my gender experience. So I don't think we hear a lot about agender. Honestly, I'm very much a kind of research person. Like when an idea strikes me, I want to read all the things, I want to learn all the things, and seeking out information in the various places like the internet, or finding books, or just content creators and other people speaking about being agender. It was really hard to find that stuff in the world. So I wanted to make a video describing how I arrived at agender, and to talk a little bit about what being agender means, what being agender means to me, and some things you can think about if you are thinking that you might be agender as well. So the word agender means literally without gender. And that seems very simple, but there are a lot of nuances there to describe how people who use the term agender to talk about themselves feel in relation to gender. Agender can mean that you feel that you lack gender or are genderless. Agender can mean that you feel like your gender is unknown or undefinable, not aligning with anything binary or anything non-binary. Agender can mean that you just feel there are no words to describe your gender identity, that your gender identity exists outside of language. Agender can also mean that you simply have decided not to label your gender at all. You want it to remain unlabeled and undefined. All of these ways to relate to gender, or to ultimately not relate to gender, can be described by the word agender. And within the agender community, there are people who are describing their gender and experiencing gender in all of those ways. So the reason I decided to use agender to describe my particular gender identity and my experience of gender is because in doing the introspective work, thinking about my life, my childhood, my adulthood, I realized that throughout the course of my life, I have never really deeply connected with either the idea of being a man or of being a woman, or really of being kind of like anything in between or therewithal. Just never really connected to those things. And any time that I have been asked to like embody particularly maleness, because I was assigned male at birth, anytime I'm asked to perform or embody maleness, to act it out, it feels exactly like that. It feels like a performance to me. It feels like a coat I put on. It feels like a drag that I wear, and I go out in the world and I'm being a man. I have this experience all the time of, kind of like mostly moving through my life, not really feeling gendered in any kind of way. But in certain circumstances, I become aware of how I am being male. I become aware of performing masculinity and maleness, and I'm feeling myself being a man. I also realized in my reflection that throughout my experience, I've always felt very pressured to perform maleness and to perform masculinity and what it means to be a man. I felt that pressure very strongly as a child, which seems sort of strange that a child would feel that pressure, but I did from as early as I can remember. I felt sort of like pressured to be like the other boys and feeling very different from them as well, and just feeling an anxiety that I was different, feeling this really strong like sense of, oh, you got to just be like them because you're not, and that's bad. That never really changed. I carried that in with me into adulthood. And to be quite honest, I still feel that way sometimes. I still feel some pressure to perform maleness and to perform masculinity all the time. And I certainly recognize that this feeling of separateness from people who are cisgender and male. I don't feel that comfort that they seem to feel existing inside their gender. I also recognize that while I did not feel comfortable within the gender that I was assigned at birth, I didn't really want to change it either. I wasn't really seeking to move into another gender experience. I didn't feel like I was being excluded from a gendered experience that I wanted to be a part of. I wasn't looking to be a different gender. I mostly just wanted to say a continued no thank you to gender entirely. I did not want to be part of thinking about gender and experiencing it or sort of owning a gender and performing it. I just wanted to like not be a part of it. I wanted to say no thank you. And it was that feeling of just wanting to say no thanks to all of that, both culturally and socially, and also internally and interpersonally. That was kind of when I was like, you know what? Agender is probably the language that will work for me. So here are a few other things to think about if you are on a journey for yourself to of questioning whether or not agender is maybe what is the right language for you. Agender does not mean you have to be androgynous. You don't have to perform androgyny in order for your agender experience to be authentic and valid. Your gender identity is the experience that you are having within yourself, the way that you understand and know your experience of gender. You don't have to prove that to anyone. You don't have to express it in a particular way in order for that to be palatable to others, for it to be true. You are agender if that is your gender identity and that is your experience. You don't have to perform androgyny in order for it to be valid. Agender does not mean you have to transition or change the gender expression you're comfortable with. As I talked about when I was expressing my personal experience, being agender doesn't mean that you have to experience dysphoria. It doesn't mean that you have to want to transition somehow. It doesn't mean that you have to change the gender expression that you were comfortable with. Now, granted, all of those things could be part of your agender experience because those things are things that can be part of a transgender experience. But they don't have to be. You don't have to feel like there are certain marks you have to hit that other transgender or non-binary people hit in order for you as an agender person to be valid. So if you are not wanting to transition, not having dysphoria, not wanting to change your gender expression, that doesn't invalidate your experience as an agender person. Agender does not mean you have to identify as non-binary or transgender. So often people will ask, well, is agender non-binary too? Is agender being trans? In a broad sense and in a broad understanding, agender is under the transgender umbrella. Transgender means, as an experience, means that you are assigned a particular gender at birth, and you realize that is not the actual gender that you inhabit and that you live, and that you move from the gender you're assigned at birth into some other gender identity. Agender is that process. You are moving from a gender that you are assigned at birth into some other understanding of your gender. So it technically is a transgender experience. But not every agender person feels comfortable using that language to describe themselves. That can either just be because of kind of the cultural way that we talk about being transgender and cultural way that we generally understand it. Oh, it could also just be their particular experience of being agender. You know, if you feel like you don't have a gender experience at all, you're not in the game whatsoever. So transgender wouldn't apply to you because there's no gender to trans, basically, right? All of those things are equally valid ways. You use the language you want to use to describe yourself. If you feel as an agender person that you want to call yourself non-binary and you want to call yourself transgender as well, thumbs up. That is absolutely fine to do and encouraged to do. You're part of the team. If you don't, also great, also highly encouraged. You're also part of the team. However, whatever language best helps you understand your experience is the language that you should use. But just remember that you don't have to exclude yourself from using particular kinds of language just because you maybe feel there's an extra social pressure for you not to do that. Agender does not have a checklist to meet or a test to pass in order for you to use that language for yourself. This is the most important, and I think it is true about language and labels of all kinds. There isn't some external test that somebody put together for you to take and get a passing grade on in order for you to call yourself agender. There isn't a checklist that exists with 10 specific things that you have to hit and check off in order for you to say that you're agender. If the language agender and the things that it implies and the things that we understand it to be, if those things resonate with you and those things feel like they are your experience, they describe your experience, they describe what you live, then you can take that language, which is just a tool, and use it for yourself. Labels are tools, not tests. They exist to help us describe our experience, and they exist to help us connect with other people who share the same or similar experiences that we do. That's all. If the tool of agender makes sense to you and you can use it to understand yourself and connect with others, by all means use it. If someone is trying to gatekeep you out of using agender or trying to gatekeep you out of any kind of community or saying that agender is not valid for you specifically, they don't have the right to say that. If you feel the language is right for you, then the language is right for you and use it. If down the road you decide that it isn't, it's okay to put it down and find some other language that works for you. So I hope that was a helpful but brief introduction to what being agender means and some things to think about if you are wondering whether or not you are agender. There will be more video on this channel about being agender, so keep an eye out for that. And if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me. If you go to my site, acedadadvice.com, there's a way to contact me. So let's get in touch and let's talk about being agender. It is still an experience that I am working through and understanding for myself. So be fun to connect with other agender folks out there. See you in the next video.